Hello and welcome everyone to yet another episode of TLG's Faction Chat. As per usual, I'm joined by my awesome co-host KingChezz. Chezzy, how are you feeling today, man?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. BeardyBog, sir. It's been a great day in the world of Gwent for me. So I'm climbing my MMR and getting myself into top 50, ready for the Challenger qualifiers. So pretty good for me. Today I am. Well, I guess today we
You did it again. So
yeah. Well, I'll let you introduce the guest, shall I?
Yep. Pleasure to have you here. Today it's Anna's turn to shine. And we have some really good guests today. So Chezzy, could you care to introduce them?
Yeah, sure. I jumped ahead, right? I missed out your bit, but my bad.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
That's live podcasting, guys.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Flow through it.
If you guys are Gwent veterans, you might know who one of our guests is, but we'll skate past that, right? So first of all, we're joined by Spiro. I think he's finished top 100 in
Best
rank
African
out of
player,
every
right?
single season he's competed in, right? So I guess he's half decent, although I don't think he ever finished above me on rank ladder in open beta when I tried. So I mean, he can't be that good, right? But yeah, Spiro from who's newest member to the team, I think, right? So welcome, Spiro. Welcome to the Faction Chat.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to it. Been practicing my Northern Realms all day today, getting prepared for the Faction Chat, as everyone has seen on my channel earlier today.
And I heard it went very well for you, right? I mean, you climbed all them MMRs, right?
Well, I mean, today there was a lot of weird things on ladder today, so I don't know. Climbing today, we kind of climbed the opposite direction.
That's the best one.
But whilst we're being joined by Spiro, who probably is a little bit of an underwhelming guest for you guys, you're probably a little disappointed with Spiro. I only joke with you, Spiro. But we are joined by a very special guest today. Last week we were joined by the Monsters ambassador. This week we are joined by Northern Realms ambassador himself, Mr. McBeard. Welcome, McBeard. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on board.
Oh, hello. I would like to say that me and Spyro are equal guests.
I mean,
equally important guests. Also, but thank you. I think that's really nice, Chezzy. Thanks. Yes, I'm here. I'm the Northern Realms. The ambassador program it's been cool, but it's been weird for me because I'm not the kind of person who's going to stick to a single faction for content or for streams. But there's an expectation that I would be. So I have sharpened my knowledge on Northern Realms quite a bit. And I do really like playing the faction, and I do play it on rank. But I'm not devoted like, let's say, Ocean Mud. So I will still be able to talk about Northern Realms. Believe me, I love me some trebuchets.
Well, to be fair, I think that's a great way of taking on the ambassador role, right? You want to embrace the Northern Realms whilst also those people that love Northern Realms who come to watch your streams, come to watch your content, whilst introducing them to other things, right? I think that's only healthy for Gwent, and I think that's a great way of doing the ambassador role. So, and I think, to be honest with you, McBee, you are the only person in the entire room, right, in this entire talk show who thinks that you and Spyro are on the same level as guests. So, but I mean, if that's the way you feel, then good.
I mean, we're both playing the same game, guys. You gotta keep everybody on the same level. It's playing the same game. We all like. It's, I've just been doing it for a little longer, but it doesn't even matter that I've been doing it for longer because nothing since October even matters. It's not even, none of those rules are even in the game anymore. So
I'm only joking, Mr. He knows we all love him here.
No, also, by the way, I thought it's supposed to be Spiro, not Spyro. Like I've been telling people to call you Spiro, and now like Chezzy's like doing it.
Have you ever played PlayStation before, Chezzy? What's going on?
No, but his name isn't Spyro, right? It's like
Spiro,
his literal name is Spiro.
It's a Greek name. It's everyone.
Yeah. Right, like Spiro, right? So
it's not like the dragon. Yeah. It's not like the dragon.
Exactly.
A unique name.
So I'd like to also welcome both of our guests, and I think like they're both equally important. Although I would probably say McBee's tad bit like up there, but yeah. So now that our guests have been introduced, like what's next on the agenda, Mr. Chezzy, sir?
So next on the agenda, I think this is, the best way to start today's NR thing is discussing the decks that we've recently played with NR, right? Because that's why most people are here, right? They want to hear about our experiences with NR as a faction and our thoughts on it, right? So I think the best way to jump into this topic is discussing the decks that we've recently played with NR and the sort of success and how we feel about NR as a faction. So I'd like to start, and obviously if any of you guys have watched my streams and stuff, you've seen me playing some Shoot Meave lately. Honestly, I think it's probably the strongest NR faction, NR deck. We saw a teammate of ours, Mr. Green Knight, who waltzed through the qualifiers. Right, he lost one single game the whole qualifiers, and as he brought this deck, and he said it performed amazingly well for him. And I played it on ladder. I think it's slightly, I think it does help when you had the ban in the qualifying tournament system. Plus, it was unknown, but I think it's a very, very strong ladder deck, and it's been performing pretty well. It's very flexible. It has a lot of the strengths that Meave Engine Overload has, whilst also having that short range finisher in the shoe and the flexible win con. And it's a lot of fun, right? It's point spammy, which is right in my wheelhouse, right? I love point spam decks. I'm not the kind of guy that likes to play control. I don't mind engines, but give me point spam and I'm happy all day, right? So I'm really enjoying Meave Engine over Meave Shoop. I think Meave Shoop is a very fun deck, and I'm glad to see it. Glad to see some sort of NR deck that I can finally play. This is the first NR deck I've enjoyed playing since Homecoming's come, so I'm really happy about it. Does anybody else want to take up this topic of discussion?
Yeah, I've also been playing some NR Shoop as well. It's only. I mean, there's also Adder that I've been thinking about trying lately. I mean, Adder's very good, obviously, when
Adder's out there. Yeah, Adder's out there.
When there's a monster meta, when there's a monster meta, you can do extremely well with Adder. Unfortunately, Adder, though, its reliancy on the single card Hubert, I think, makes it very vulnerable to any other deck besides a proactive deck such as monsters. So it's a very tough. It's a meta choice basically. Adder's a meta choice deck, but yeah, personally, I've been playing a lot of Meave Shoop. I did decently all right with it, although recently I have been struggling a bit because the ladder lately in the last week or so has been very unstable, and it's very hard to predict what type of removal cards or tech cards your opponent might be running. So I haven't been having.
As Alaska calls it, zoo, right? So.
Well, it's like everywhere on the ladder is like that. Everywhere, because there's floors on ranks now. Because people can say, "All right, well, here I finally hit rank 4. I'm going to try this deck," and if it doesn't work, you don't plummet.
Yeah.
So it's like at every level, and also the way that I think I was on my last podcast, I can't remember who it was that said it, but because I think it was maybe Malaysian, but since pro rank is, no matter which way you want to slice it, easier on your stress and time to make, more people are getting in there, which allows for more variance as to the kinds of people that would be playing to be big on pro rank. So some people are just like trying it out because they're getting there for the first time. So it changes the landscape quite a bit.
But I think another point that Spiro brought up there, right, is Adder was great when Monsters was popular. But I'm finding this week, right, people are happy with their monster scores this season, right? Monsters is the most dominant faction this season. It's had all the good scores, and because we're at the end of the season, people are happy with their monster scores, right, and they're moving away from playing monsters at the moment. So Adder's struggling because you can't play Adder. So Adder was a great deck a week ago or 10 days ago, right? Because people were farming those monster games. And if you had caught on to that fact, you could have got some good Adder scores. But Adder's struggling a bit because it does really thrive when monsters popular. So I think like as the meta evolves, and NR's in a funny spot, right? Because there are different ways you can approach the NR meta, and there are different things. But yeah, McBeard, do you want to tell us about the decks you've been playing? Like, I mean, you touched on it a little bit there, but do you want to tell us the actual NR decks you have been playing? And
so the main ones that I've actually put like hours into. The thing is, like because I'm actually doing my placements, even though I'm not pro rank yet, I am actually just pushing up the ladder and taking whatever I have. So when I did that with Northern Realms, I did that early on. It was like trying out Meave for the first time, so I played a lot of Meave Engine and Meave Drog, which is kind of the same deck, but just a different path to victory. And maybe you expect one thing and you see another thing. Meave Shoop is also very strong and out there. I personally haven't played that. I
Get
also
on it. Get
I
on
also
that.
took a lot of I did a lot of research on Ada because I felt like she was underrepresented when I should have maybe been looking at Hensel because now Ada's actually out there. I was watching some
Mhm.
streams on the Pro Ladder
Mhm.
last night. I was seeing Ada mirrors actually occur. Like there's Ada's out there. I think Pajabol was playing Ada, Trinet's playing Ada
Mhm.
last night. So there's a lot of Ada out there because yeah, Hubert's really strong. It is good against monsters. But there are ways that monsters can play around Ada by using immune units. And Ada's main weakness is that not only do you need Hubert, but you also need a target to get full value from Ada. And I think if eights were all over the place, we'd see a different meta altogether. We'd see more Geralt of Rivia, more Ekdex probably. We know Leo's really good, but it's got that secondary condition. So I think that Ada is in a landscape that could be just a little bit better for her, but I don't think she's bad. I don't think she needs to change. And I think she's a good leader and she has the provisions to make it work. I mean, I'm really wondering. I think Henselt is the most underrepresented leader, and I think that Henselt's better than Ada. But that's just me, like conceptually. I think that
Mhm.
it should be better because
Mhm.
Henselt has more flexibility. It has the
Mhm.
ability to potentially make the same amount of points and not rely on Hubert as a combo, and even potentially have an easier time winning round one. And I'm playing now. This isn't NR, but I've been playing a ton of Brewer, which runs like 3 different win conditions. So with Henselt being a win condition in itself, where you compare it to like Morvran, who's like 6 extra points that can protect Unicorn Karnax and stuff like that. Henselt is just about playing 2 engines at once that you have to deal with or you lose the round. I feel like, and I feel like it's just a matter of time. Someone's going to get there. I'm covering a lot of stuff right now because I've been doing a lot of testing. The main ones, though, for me are Ada and Meave to answer the questions, so we can move
Okay.
on.
No. That I really enjoyed that. For me, this is the best part of the talk show, right? When
Yeah.
guests are really passionate, and that's why we're trying to get these ambassadors and stuff, people who are really passionate about the faction and stuff, and who have a lot to talk about. So great answer there, McBeard. We will be touching on Hensel as we go on. I don't want to jump into it too early like I did last week, right? So I will move on to Beardy. Maybe Beardy can steer us towards that question next. But Beardy, what have you been playing? I know you've been taking a little bit of a break for you anyway from Gwen.
I mean, for me, break is basically like no 1,000 games, just like 800.
Yeah.
But
It's still more than most
yeah.
people.
That's
More
what you
than
gotta
your
do.
average
Large
player.
volumes of games, it changes your life. Like I just gotta say, like, as someone who plays the game a lot, but has recently turned up the amount I play to like 3 times as much, it's a completely different world. Like
Mm-hmm.
the intense focus of the game. I just wanted to shout out that part.
Yeah, I totally agree with what McBeard's saying. Like I stream every day, like 5-6 hours a day, and there's people playing twice as many games as me, and it's like it blows my mind. And maybe Beardy can touch on that whilst he's touching on this next topic, because he is one of the
I mean, at this point, I'm
most
just playing like
dedicated players, right?
I'm playing fun decks, so I'm not trying to be the most competitive, right? I'm trying actually to enjoy the game for a bit because as we touched before, like playing like notorious amount of incredible amount of games like under such a short amount of time is incredibly tiring and exhausting. So yeah, it's really not fun, but it's just the nature of pro ladder, right?
For sure.
I mean, we can. There are some like exceptions to the rule, but we won't, go deep. Like just say like Colimon, right? But back to the topic. I think like I haven't played many NR games. I think it's barely 20, if even maybe
15
not
it
even.
is. It's
Yeah,
exactly
15.
15.
So from from what I gathered, I think like Ada, which I played her only, and I think like I think in theory she just has the highest cap, right? For example, I think Hubert was 50 points in one game. So I don't think any other leader slash card and like whatever you want to call it can reach that high ceiling. So that fact alone, I think she's probably stronger than me, because if you face a heavy control decks, like you're still probably gonna lose with me, especially if you draw like badly, which happens a bit often with me. You don't have as much thinning as SK or as much as many bomb cards as monsters do. So if I had to pick one leader, I would still say it's Ada, just like for that wow factor with Hubert. But of course, if you don't draw Hubert, then you probably lose any game, which is probably that bit terrible, right? But that's just my experience. Like I'm not really experienced with Anna at this point. I think it was my favorite faction maybe like 12 patches ago.
Quite a bit
I-
armor, right?
yeah,
Hubert
exactly.
Hubert isn't like the beginning and the end. It's just you want Hubert. Hubert is the combo. But if you need to use Ada in a crucial situation in round 2 to keep your card or something, that's usually okay. Hubert has a lot of ways of like being big without Ada, but simply not drawing it is the big problem, right?
Well, the
Yeah.
thing is, like, if you face
Cards like-
NG, right, they just lock your dragons, and then you just play. You're just playing bad cards at that point, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, like 8 points is a lot, but I think you touched it before, McBee. Like there aren't that many, units which are 8 points. So Ada is not reliable 8 points as opposed to Woodland Spirit, which is always 8 points. So in theory, she's the worst NR leader if you look at just for the ability wise. But yeah, I won't go on for next 10 minutes or something. So next question is something which I actually I think it was my question, and I really would like to hear your thoughts about this one because I'm genuinely surprised, puzzled, like how you want to call it, about this. So considering provisions and the fact that like Hansel's ability is actually very decent, and we can all like agree that his ability is
One of the
very
best.
very strong.
It's a deck thinner. Like it blows my mind that no one's playing it.
Yeah, and he has like he got like a big buff, right? So
for sure.
I've been thinking like my answer to this, like we can all agree that his ability is really strong. Like
For
thinning
sure.
is winning and blah blah blah. But I think the fact is that he doesn't have the ability which makes NR engine stick, right? So like if you look at me, her ability is really boring, but she makes those little engines be like way harder to remove, like from 3 to 4. Like it's a really big change. And like if you compare it to Fall Test, like his ability also can make some like OP cards instantly proc, whereas like Hansel doesn't really do that. So you just have like a one big blow, and then you're just playing like a bad cards, which are NR cards, right? Because they just get like removed or like they're pretty much garbage without support. And he doesn't really have support apart from Revenants, and Revenants are pretty vulnerable, right? So that's my take on Hansel. Like I've been like trying to think the answer for this question. So yeah, that's me.
I think that Henselt has Henselt units, and Henselt, like, I feel like just putting in the engines isn't going to work with Henselt, even though he does have a way of making them stick in that the Henselted unit is buffed and ready to go.
Yeah, it has seal,
plus,
yeah.
and plus the original one still needs to be answered. So you play 2 engines at once. That's something that Henselt can do that no other leader can do, and that's necessary because playing 2 engines at once puts your opponent behind on one answer while you continue to develop threats. But cards like Blue Stripe Commando, Temerian Drummer, these are cards that are already at 4 that are really strong cards for Northern Realms. I find that Northern Realms actually has like a deceptively strong bronze core, but the engines are really what gets the spotlight, and the engines are the vulnerable ones. So and Henselt's Zeal ability, sometimes like it could be a trap sort of, because you can expect that he's really good with Kedwenny Knight. He's really good with Trebuchet as well. If your opponent drop Witchers in the back row, you drop 2 Trebs immediately, and then that's it. You have the round. It's just like there are a lot of ways to use Henselt that doesn't need to rely on the buff or the zeal, but just playing 2 engines. And I think that in a world where a leader like Ardal is very similar to Henselt in that his leader ability is likely going to be played before round 3 to secure something, whereas every other one-use leader is being used in round 3 to win the game. So is there an environment out there for a leader that can be used once but not last and still be competitive? Like, is there like a rule? Is there like, if I'm at X cards with this in my deck and I play Henselt, I'm more likely to win? The problem is no one's playing enough Henselt to really kind of spreadsheet that stuff out. But I honestly believe with those provisions and this ability, with the deck thinning, double engine creation, the zeal, and like it all seems there. Like when you look at Morvran being good because he has high provisions and 6 extra points to buff, that's all he has really. So if you're playing something like Erden, he doesn't even have that. So I just feel like sometimes it just seems like Henselt's offering more and we're just not really trying hard enough, but there could be something I'm just not getting. And I'm also going to get up for 2 minutes, and I apologize, but I'd like to know to hear what you guys think as well.
Not a problem.
I mean, there's other things. There's even other combos you can pull off with Henselt. Like you could run Blue Dream, and you could like Blue Dream your
Unicorn
opponent's say
Tyrannox.
Unicorn, and then you could Blue Dream into double unicorn with Henselt. You could do a lot of flashy things with Henselt, like its leader ability is very flexible. I mean, it is on paper, it is a very powerful leader ability. I mean, getting 2 engines on the board and boosting one of them up by, I believe it's 4, is extremely powerful because the second engine you put on the board, it puts it almost impossibly out of removal range, at least immediate removal range. So especially on red coin, you could use Henselt and you could almost solidify yourself the round. And yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I played against Henselt I played against Henselt twice recently in the last 2 days, and they opened up with Henselt turn 1, round 1, and I was on blue coin, and I had to lose on even. There was nothing I could do about it. But
you still probably win, right? So
that's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah, that's exactly what the problem was. I still win the game, which that's the problem. I guess there's no reliable finisher. Maybe it might actually be, as McBeard actually mentioned, maybe you're actually meant to run Hubert in Henselt and get double final say and use Adder as as Hubert as your win mission. Maybe that's an idea. I don't know. I'd have to test it sometime. But because the problem with Henselt, like, you win round 1, but the problem is I just don't see many Henselt players winning round 3, and that's obviously the most important round to win, is winning round 3.
Yeah, but that's because you're forced to play like NR cards, and they just don't stick. That's what I was trying to say. Like, you can always win one round with Hansel, but you can't. Like, if you try to save Hansel for round 3, then you just get like Mega Bled in round 2, and then you probably still like get 2-0 or lose the game, right? So like that, like how would you guys like change the?
And that's the thing. Yeah, sorry, Karen.
I just wanted to touch on this topic about Hansel. So I've actually given this quite a bit of thought, right? Because I don't know if, like, sometimes on a Friday, right, I'll do a freestyle Friday and I'll try and build a brand new deck or whatever. And I actually tried to do it with Hansel. And I came to a very obvious conclusion, the reason why Hansel is struggling, right? So Hansel's kind of similar to Ithne, right? You can kind of compare them. They're very similar on provisions, and their ability is almost the same, right? It's 4 points. Obviously, Hansel has the upside of being able to do other things other than 4 points, but the problem is Hansel can't lose 4 points because there's no target there's literally no card for Hansel for synergy with Hansel, right? Because the problem with Hansel is he has to be used on bronze cards, and the current core set of cards right now is there are no strong bronze cards, right? Bronze cards cap out at about 7 points, right? They get you about 7 points across all factions. Slave infantry is probably the strongest, which can cap out at 9, and that's like high provision. You've got like griffins, and you've got ice trolls, which is 7 and 8 in monsters, but that's about as high as they can. And Hansel's just pulling one of them, right? That's all he's doing. So he's just +4. That's basically, he is thinning, which is nice, which is great. That, like, obviously thinning is great. The problem with Hansel right now is there is no good bronze card in Northern Realms that you want to play with Hansel, right? There's no finisher card, right? Because leaders...
Kid Valley Knight is the only one, but it's like...
Dirty Mauler is Mauler is actually sleeper good, for the record.
But you say K20 Knight, right? Yeah, and that's great, right? He has synergy with K20 Knight, and that is completely true. But that means you have to play a 4-point card that's like 6.
Summoning Circle, probably. That's like
and then you have to run summoning circle.
Yeah.
There is no synergy for Hansel without playing bad cards in your deck, right? You want to be playing a good deck that your leader synergizes with, not a bad deck that your leader synergizes with, right? And that is the issue with Hansel right now, right? I think Hansel is actually sleeper one of the best leaders in the game. If CDPR, it's not even like changes the design philosophy, but actually introduces strong bronze cards, right? Because at the moment there are very few very strong bronze cards. The closest one is K20 Revenant, right? That is a bronze card that kind of can be a win con, because K20 Revenant can snowball like crazy, but you don't want to be pulling it with Hansel, if that makes sense. It's not a Hansel target, even though it sort of fills the category for a Hansel target, because
you could use it. No, I mean, if you're able to snowball, if there's a unit with 1 on the board, you play Hansel on the K20 Knight.
It's a little like situational to be consistent, right? So there's 2 main things you need in Gwen, right? Consistency and power. And the K20 Revenant has the power, it just lacks consistency, right? And I really do think Hansel is one of the stronger leaders. The current card set doesn't allow him to be competitively viable because bronze cards are weak. If you make bronze card, if you put slave infantry in NR, Henselt would probably be played, right? If he could pull a second Slave Infantry, it would probably be good enough to be a finisher card. But as McBeard pointed out, right, you want to use Henselt in round 1, and any leader that wants to be used in round 1 is not viable, because leaders need to you need power plays in round 3, because round 1 and 2, as much as people want to think they matter, they almost don't matter, right? You just play bad cards, you pass. Even with dry passing going, winning on round 1, like Spiro said, Henselt wins on round 1 on even on red coin, and then still loses the game. If it's on blue coin, it can't even win round 1 on even. It just struggles. I think if you bring in stronger bronze cards, it will. I think Henselt will be great, and that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the topic.
Well, he can't pull golds. That's the funny thing, right?
Yeah, but you can only run 1 gold, right? You have to do Mimi shenanigans to get It's Mimi shenanigans. It's Mimi shenanigans, which is inconsistency, right?
Yeah,
it's not going to be competitive with Mimi shenanigans.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like what you say about Mimi shenanigans. I mean, if you think about if you can have a deck that like almost guarantees winning round 1, you can really force your opponent out round. The first thing that kind of jumps to my mind when I think about forcing your opponent out of round 1 is maybe like a Dragon's Dream type of deck for round 3.
Ragnarok.
I mean,
I
mean,
that's so Dream you can play on turn 1.
I mean, if you can build a deck that like forces your opponent out of round 1 early, if you can, like just absolutely just smashes round 1, you just force your opponent round, and you can force yourself into, if you can consistently force yourself into a long round 3 every time, cards like Dragon's Dream and Ragnarok and Row Punishment cards could be pretty insane in a deck like that. So I'm wondering if there's any hidden potential like in a Henselt deck with any type of like combos like that. But
the problem with that,
he does have a lot of provisions, right?
Just because I think we've covered this a lot. One thing I would say about that, right, is using your leader ability is like a card in round 3, right? If you keep 3 leader charges on Morvan, that's worth a card. If you keep 3 leader charges on Morvan, that's worth a card. You keep Woodland Spirit, that's worth a card, right? If you've used leader to get round 1 in round 1, right, and then they go, well, screw it, I'm just going to take the round down 2 cards, then they just bleed your round 2. Sure, they might go into round 3 down a card, but your Dragon Stream isn't going to work still. So it only works to a certain extent, right, until they realize you're running Dragon Stream. Because Northern Realm struggles a bit. It does still struggle a bit for actual points.
Yeah, as soon as people expect you to run a certain card like Dragon's Dream, obviously, if that person knows that you're running Dragon's Dream, it's going to be a very different game, because obviously the pretty typical way to play against Dragon's Dream is you just go full smoke mode and never pass.
So, I think we covered Henselt pretty strongly there. I don't think. Does anybody have any final points on Henselt before we move on?
I think that like the idea that a deck can win round 1 with Ragnarok or Dragon's Dream in it, I think is very realistic. Brewer currently does that. I think I've been playing a lot of Brewer. He's really good blue coin leader, because he has the crushing traps that he can play before Brewer and with tactical, that just makes it really hard for the opponent to commit into that kind of thing. And I feel like with Northern Realms, there isn't like a card like Crushing Trap that can like really help you like that. Maybe Sabrina in a way, but you need setup. That's the thing. Northern Realms needs setup for a lot of things that other factions can do on deploy or the next turn after passing, that kind of stuff. So not having access to anything like that, because we were talking about how you need to have the units that stick. You need to have ways to win round 1. And like Slave Infantry, you were comparing. I was about to say, Temerian Drummer is pretty good if you're talking about really good 6-slot bronzes. Temerian Drummer is really, really good card, but it is still a card that needs to live. Slave Infantry on deploy, 9-point card. Like there's the comparison here is, I think the comparison here is that Slave Infantry, I like that card. It's very strong for its provision point. I don't know if I want to nerf that card or change that card. It's not really about Slave Infantry, but it is about how that card is able to get 9 points with nothing on the with only a 1, like the worse your board is, the better that card is, right?
It's basically a goal, right? So
yeah, Northern Realms on the other side, where it's like the worse their board is, the worse the rest of their game could be. So it's just, me personally, I feel like the only thing that I'm missing is playtime with it, because I think that if I played a lot with Henselt, I would have maybe just a better answer here. But I have played a lot in the past. It seemed fun. I love pulling stuff out of the deck. I never played a Summoning Circle version. I did play like a crazy WinCon version that tried to secure first round with like double Trebs or double Eternian Maulers, because then you can remove 4 and you have like a loaded remove 4 card like on the board already. So they can't play anything on the front row, but you're putting Trebs, so they can't play anything on the back row. it felt really good. But I mean, this is early on in Homecoming. Like I was playing boulders, which aren't good, but it was a card that moved things to the other row. Spears of Spala obviously are much better, but it's like, yes, like just movement, trick people into playing on one row because you're traps. They are always going to play on one row. Then you can play row punishment. It seemed like it worked. It just doesn't seem like it worked better than some of the better decks out there.
I think that's fair. I think Hensel's, like I said, I think his ability is pretty good, but he's just lacking maybe targets right now. I think.
Also, his second skin is just like Pogus, right?
For sure.
Yeah,
Last of
Unicorns.
yeah.
So continuing on the theme of leaders right now. Obviously, we've touched on Hensel, and right now Meave is quite strong. Not a bad leader. Like it's doing like Meave has pretty much brought it back. Brought NR back from the brink of not being played at all. Most other NR leaders are pretty bad, apart from maybe Ada. So my question here is, how would you guys make the other NR leaders strong? How would you make them competitively viable without buffing just the core cards in NR and making Meave even stronger, right? I'm going to just disappear for 2 seconds, guys, so you guys just keep talking. And yeah, I'll open this question straight away to Spiro. Let's see what Spiro thinks of this question.
So this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I've been discussing this in chats and stuff a lot. It's a difficult thing because like a lot of the Northern Realms cards are quite vulnerable to removal, and obviously the great thing about Meave is she helps you protect them against removal. She like a thing like Gimpy, for example, it does 3 damage. You buff up a Revenant by 1 with Meave, suddenly the Revenant can't die to Gimpy any longer. There's a lot of she obviously helps you just because the biggest weakness to Northern Realms is Northern Realms as a whole faction is very vulnerable to removal and disruption. It's very easily disruptible, and obviously Meave tries to strengthen the biggest weakness of Northern Realms, which helps a lot. But now the thing is, how a lot of other other leaders in Northern Realms, like Faltist and for example, they don't see much play because they are just so vulnerable to removal and disruption. So how do you go ahead and is strengthen or make these other leaders more viable, like Faltist, without buffing the cards in Northern Realms, thus potentially making Meave overpowered to a certain extent? That's the thing I've been like thinking about so much.
Yeah, Meave Meave is telling the story about Northern Realms, showing how closely they walk the line in their bronze core, because with an extra point on their bronzes, their bronze core is very, very good. Unfortunately, only one leader can do that. So what I have found personally, this kind of plays into what you were saying. What I have found personally is that by playing more Meave and winning more games with Northern Realms with Meave, I have learned how to play Northern Realms better, because Meave has given me like the safety net, because it's like the stuff that I want to do when I play Northern Realms, Meave allows me to do those things. But through the volume of games that I've played with Meave, I've found like there's new tricks out there that I maybe wasn't exploring because it was very hard to establish a board with Northern Realms. So things like how Meave is playing Hubert, because she can make like Synthesis Plays and Okvist stick on the board and protect those cards for a late Hubert, like at the very, very end. And other stuff like just playing like early rounds, playing with Revenants, playing with the Temerian Drummer and stuff. Kind of valuing the zeal and valuing the boosts that are available inter-unit. Like Kidwini Sergeant is probably an underrated card. That card is very good. Kidwini Sergeant being an orders unit that also has zeal, making it a card that Northern Realms needs. One of the things that I don't like about Northern Realms is I feel like the band-aid solution for these cards is giving them orders and zeal. Because when you give them orders and zeal, it's like a deploy effect that Northern Realms cares about. But really, those are the only... I mean, it's not really like that at all. You can save it. You don't have to play it. But you could play it. So things with orders and zeal are going to be the key to Northern Realms' victory in future card sets, I think, and future card redesigns.
To potentially...
Those are the cards that can help you... you get immediate effect when you play them. If you have something on the board that cares about orders, and Northern Realms could probably stand to have even more of those cards. Like monsters have thrive on everything, right? Stuff that like Lyrian Arbalest and Lyrian Cavalry, that effect should be on more cards. Stuff like Nausicaa Sergeant for the on deploy boost, like that should be on more cards. More factions should have universal mechanics that bring up the entire core like Thrive does. It's hard to probably think of like 5 different ways to do stuff like Thrive, because Thrive is just like the best thing they came up with. It's fun and it makes sense and it's easy to understand and it's not that hard to counter and you have to play slow. Like it's just good and it's very strong at the same time. So if there are more ways to boost cards that had orders or more ways to get engines that care about orders and zeal, that would be really enriching for the Northern Realms card base, because we want to find ways that don't just make Meve better. We want to find ways that make the faction better so the other leaders can play it better.
So actually, I mean, there is a mechanic that I see someone chat speaking about a potential mechanic that Northern Realms could perhaps make use of to help with this problem. And we've actually had this mechanic before, and I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm talking about. Armor. I think armor might be an invaluable mechanic that could be brought back to Northern Realms to help with, the fine-tuning balancing, because Northern Realms right now is on a very fine line. If you buff it just a little bit in the wrong way, you can completely destroy that whole fine line and make certain things overpowered and broken. But at the same time,
botchling.
I mean, is botchling OP? Is botchling OP?
Definitely.
It's very strong. Botchling.
It's the best card in the faction. If it's not Vest, it's botchling, I think. Yeah.
Botchling is very strong. It would see play in any faction right now.
Yeah.
So I think that armor could help, adjust that fine tuning, that keep that very close line like in check, whilst being able to do like very small adjustments to obviously help improve Northern Realms the faction without like pushing it too far over that threshold.
Mm-hmm. But it seems like more than ever, that's the mechanic that Northern Realms could make the most use of, because we're talking about not buffing strength, because that's scary. But we're talking about increasing survivability and not necessarily making it so Meve is just going to be the best leader all the time. If we believe that boosting a unit makes Meve the best leader all the time, then there need to be other cards for Northern Realms.
On this topic, right, about how do we make other NR leaders viable without buffing cards to make Meve OP? I think part of the problem, right, is the same problem that Skelliger's got, that Meve is just better than the 1 point every other turn is pretty goddamn strong, right? When you can do it every single round, and when you've got 17 provisions, right? Crack is just universally the best leader in Skelliger, and Meve's the universally best leader in NR, right? And they're the only two leaders that are universally the best leaders in their faction. I guess Proof is probably universally the best leader in thing. I guess, to be fair, Morvan's probably all right. I take it back. I do take it back. There is one leader. Monsters is the only one without a universal best leader, and Goonie is, but Eridan can do weird shit, which makes him strong.
Woodland has the provisions to do it too. Like Monsters is like a situation where all the leaders, and the thing is, like Elder, we're not talking about Monsters, but where is Elder? Like, he's not a bad leader. I don't see that leader anywhere. I don't know where that card is.
I think I don't know what the answer is to this. Like, the obvious answer is nerf Meve's provisions. That's the obvious answer, right? If you make Meve less provisions, you might see more play in the other leaders. As far as armor and stuff goes, I'm pretty sure we'll be touching on something similar later on in the program, so I don't want to touch on it too much here. But I think armor would help. Sure, it would help the other leaders, but it would also help Meve, right? I don't think it would solve the issues, right? Because Meve would then just not use a leader charge on something with armor. You just play the unit with armor on a turn. You don't have Meve charge and then play something else. So I don't think it would cover that too much.
I think
Go on.
Sorry. I think for the other leaders, I think the problem a lot with Northern Realms is its reliance on like engine-based bronzes. Like it's so like all the cards are evolved. Like when you build when I was building I was trying to make my own variant of Meve Shoop, and I was looking at all the bronzes, and I'm like, damn, everything just is like an engine, something with orders ability, something that's an engine that needs to stick, and it can be difficult because sometimes you might to make other like Falters to me is a kind of leader that wants to win round one using like just normal non-committal bronzes that aren't like engines, and then try take round three with like big finishes zeal cards. But you can't really do that because right now you have to play these bronzes that are bad in Falters because they don't stick, and then your finishes don't really mean much because you struggle to get to that position where you can use your finishes in a favorable position. So I think NR just needs like more cards and more tools that can allow it to not be so invested in engine-based tools, for example.
For sure.
Full test was good like early on when you just had to develop threats that your opponent had to answer, and eventually they ran out of answers. But what Meve is doing that is developing threats that require answers, but the answers aren't actually answering. So you just really have a lot of threats to deal with. So the passing game becomes more important when you're playing against Meve. Against Full Test, you kind of know exactly like what's gonna happen. Seltkur's coming, Okva's coming, and maybe like Gaunter or Ek or something else like that on the top end. So
I think I think Spiro kind of covered this topic, just what I think would be the way to effectively help NR without making Meve OP, and that's introduce cards that don't require it, that aren't engines, right? Introduce viable cards that aren't engines, because Meve obviously can keep the engines alive and makes engine decks viable, right? It's kind of the same sort of way that the Brewer makes engine decks viable, and Morvrun's making those sort of things. Like, you can protect key targets. Meve's better than those two because she gets it one every other turn. They've just got 3 chances. But I think if you want to make NR viable without it just being Meve, you need to make cards that are viable that aren't reliant on sticking to the board, right? You need cards like Slave Infantry, for example, like we touched on it earlier. A card that doesn't require that has a deployability, right? Because then it doesn't matter whether it sticks or not. It got its value off its deploy. I think that would probably be the best way to make other NR leaders viable. But I mean, that might still help Meve. Even Meve might still be just the strongest leader. And to be honest, the way Homecoming's going, it looks like there's always going to be one leader that's stronger than the others, because it's just almost impossible to not make it like that in the way Homecoming is built at the moment, right?
Except monsters.
Except monsters. And monsters, the only reason monsters is different, right, is because of Eridin's unique ability. His ability is very, very unique. And he, like, because Goonie is universally just better than Woodland at the moment, except for in very niche scenarios, right? Woodland does still see play, but very niche, whereas Goonie's taken over. But I think they were great answers and stuff. Beardy, do you want to move on to then to?
I just have to say, like, something was skipped, or at least like in my opinion, like we basically didn't say, at least this is of course my opinion, other NR leaders, like their abilities are just like really, really good. Like, if as I said before, if I had to say like one ability which is the weakest, is probably Ada. And like, if you look at Demavent, like King Demavent the Third, like he's producing at least 2 points every 2 turns. So like, in theory, like he should be the best NR leader, and yet we can say that he's clearly the weakest, right? So that's the main problem. As you guys like said before, like if you tune some engines, like all of a sudden, like these decks do not be they become like super OP. As opposed to being like super weak, right? So that's like a really, really hard job for CDPR to balance. So I think leader wise, NI is like really, really interesting. Like, for instance, like Faultless ability, I think is in my opinion, like in theory also stronger than me, but they're like so reliant on engines, and that's, I think, the main weakness. There are no, just like pure points as like other factions do. And the another thing is like the whole meta is like very controlly, and that just doesn't suit Anna. I don't believe in old Gwen that we had like so much control. Like NG has like infinite number of locks, SK has infinite number of removals, and that just doesn't suit Anna as a faction, and that just means that only one leader is playable at this moment, and that's me. But I think as like design wise, all NR leaders are very, very strong. At least
I mean, that's the thing. I like all the leaders. I like everything they do. What they do makes sense. I think that the thing that was upsetting is that Meve's ability is so basic, but ended up being the best.
Yeah, that's so sad.
We all knew when we saw it. We're like, well, this isn't interesting, but we all know that a Temerian Drummer at 5, or a Blue Stripe Commando at 5, or a Reinforced Ballista at 4, like all of these things are like significant. It's like you get to buff your hand. You get to buff your hand anytime. So it's just like Meve came with like a mini patch within any deck that she plays, and it's like Northern Realms patch to be good if you play Meve.
I actually don't like Demavant's ability, which might be a little thing, because like Beardy pointed out, right, it's OP. If you ever make it viable, it's going to be OP. It's too strong, so you have
at least
to
2 points, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's like effectively more, right?
You have to make it non-viable. Otherwise, it's just too strong.
He's the Ericus Queen of Northern Realms.
Yeah, exactly. Which I don't mind him. Like, the point he's at now is fine, right? Because you will bully people who don't know what's coming when they face Demavant. But you play against a good player, they know what's coming, right? So they just hold their removal, their locks or whatever. But at low ranks, I can imagine Demavant is the most problematic because he just wipes your board, right? You play
Gone,
if
yeah.
you don't hold, yeah, it's just gone. Like he's a very I don't see any way of making him viable the way he is without making him OP. So if that's the case, if you want him to ever be viable, I think you'll probably need some sort of rework. But that's just my opinion on that, leader.
I was trying Demoven with Petrie's filters. So what you do is you drop a Petrie's filter first, and then you drop a reinforced ballista, buff it, shoot, use Demoven's charge, shoot, and then actually you can run siege supports because now your engines are going to live. And your siege supports are now 6 points each, but it's not consistent enough. I'm still working on it. But it is like the Petrie's filter in round 1. If you can get one of those reinforced ballistas or trebuchets to stick, Demoven will just run away with that one single unit.
Exactly.
And I think that Demoven's ability is it's a slow ability. It's maybe not as competitive as an ability, but you could say the same thing about how Emir is currently at, maybe Usurper, but more like Emir. And then, of course, Erica's Queen. And then in Scoia'tael, maybe Eldain, I guess. Like every faction has like a leader that is a cool leader, but competitively has a drawback that just means that you might have a lot of fun ranking up to like rank, 10 or whatever. And then it'll get really hard as opponents are just like, okay, well,
for sure,
I'm playing T1, so I can beat all these decks. And
true. So next question, guys, and this one is a bit controversial, but I mean it's not really. But maybe like before me, this would be like a pretty, straightforward question. So basically, it's about cards like Visigotta and Hubert, and do they need to be nerfed now, or does NR need more buffs? So like before me, I would say like of course like no nerf needed, right? But at this point, I think like Corvo is a bit like overtuned. Like the fact like I think like he should just give you charges like when you play your own units, and he will still be like pretty strong. But now it's just I think he is a bit overtuned with me, and the fact that you do need to save like a lot of removals to like you can either win round 1 and then bleed Meave, or you just like save all your removals for round 3, and either case it's like a pretty damn hard scenario. So I think he's very overtuned because he has like obvious synergy with like other cards such as Anna and what's it called, the Trident Infantry. So if he sticks, you basically win the game, and I don't like those cards, at least that type of cards. And even at like +1 every turn, he'll be like really strong. But at +2, it's just a bit too much, I think. And as far as Hubert goes, I think no card should have like infinite ceiling. I mean, that's just I don't like that design. Like he should have some kind of like cap, because he can just like catch up to anything, and that just doesn't feel Gwent to me. So I would nerf both those two cards, but might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look at Reed Hire Vampire. That was a card that kind of double dipped on damage and boost. So that card got nerfed, and I think like, oh, what was I going to say about it? I think that the big deal with Hubert, like Aglace is okay because there's not a deck out there that's really abusing Aglace, but Aglace is very similar, a similar situation where you can play Aglace last as like a 20 to 30 point play. I mean, Hubert's even bigger than that. Hubert can swing a game like 40 to 10 the other way around. It's crazy
easily
how many points. And it's just like they nerfed Shiru because his ceiling was just intense. But this is a different kind of card. This is a card that requires a target for Ada to be really good, requires Synthesis and Ocvis to stick to be really, really good. I've seen Hubert's whiff. Is Hubert's limitations enough to make it not a critical thing to look at, but at the same time, look at a Glace and look at the way they nerfed Regis.
But he's really cheap, right? Like he's only like 7 provisions, I believe, right? So that's like mega cheap. So I do think he's like.
That's a good point. He is very cheap.
Yeah. But okay, so on the Hubert topic, so. Yeah, I mean Hubert is a very cheap card for the value he gets. He well exceeds the value of his provision cost almost every time, very consistently. Right? But the thing is,
should be like
the rest. The thing is, the rest of the deck that Ada is built around just. I mean, so when I play against Ada, every time, I'll be in the final round. I'll be like 30, 40 points ahead. And I'll just sit there thinking,
I'm gonna lose.
I've lost because I mean, down comes Tainted Ale, down comes Ocvis, down comes Leader Ability,
Sabrina.
And you just see it all unravel in front of you. And I mean, Ocvis goes off for 20. Yeah.
Face
Octopus
Lizard,
goes,
no problems.
Octopus goes off for 15 points. Then down comes Tainted Ale for it's 6, basically 12 because of you.
Yep.
But it basically just doubles all. It just doubles all the damage basically in a way. And if you don't have a Tor removal, you just lose because you just if you go into the unfavorable round 3 where you don't have the answer for it, it's you lose the game. There's no other answer besides you just lose. There's no other way to win if you don't have the answer and you don't have a favorable round. But the thing is,
Immune units help.
it's easy enough to. Oh, am I getting disconnected? Yeah. Sorry,
No,
it's
no,
it's
no.
easy. Sorry, it's easy enough to disrupt that strategy by just trying to control the game and get to round 3 on a favorable position. Unfortunately, certain decks like monsters can't control the game very well, so they just end up losing to it. So Hubert in its current state isn't a problem in terms of it's not like overpowered in terms of it makes a certain deck broken. The card itself is quite crazy. Like I could definitely see in future when they release if Northern Realms becomes stronger or has other cards, I can see Hubert becoming a massive problem. So I don't think Hubert will stay in the current state that he's in for very long, because I believe that if Northern Realms gets any types of changes or new cards or buffs, Hubert could just become a very, very problematic card. I mean, it already is slightly problematic, but yeah. And as far as Vice-Gotha is concerned, then the thing of that card is it's vulnerable to 2 things. Obviously, removal. If you have any sort of removal, you pretty easily, and not just removal, just movement,
But
removal.
no other faction apart from monsters have like reliable source of movements.
I mean, Squirtle has
SK?
movement.
ST, yeah, ST.
Yeah,
ST,
I guess.
just,
Um,
ST
and
wrecks
monsters,
it.
and not just that. It's not a movement or removal, one of the 2. So the only way you're ever going to get Vice-Gotha value is you need to immune him. It will not stick if you do not immune him. If you do not have immune him, he never sticks. And that could be maybe a problem with immunity. Maybe immunity is actually a problem. I honestly believe immunity is a slightly problematic mechanic in the game, and it makes cards like Slizzard and Vice-Gotha and all kinds of cards pretty nuts. I think the problem with cards like Vice-Gotha is not actually his ability, is the fact that immunity kind of, just makes it just like impossible to interact with.
Having immune cards is not nearly as bad as giving immune to cards, because that means that every single card has to be, is it okay if it's
balanced
immune?
around immunity.
Yeah, is it okay if it's immune? Because Aridin can make it immune unless it's a non-faction, non-neutral card.
But then Avalok
and
couldn't, right? So.
Yeah, the Avalok thing, I feel like if immunity was a problem, I mean, shout out to Gold Immunity back in the day, where every single gold card you played was immune. That's like an actual, if you don't know, that's an actual world that Gwent was in. Every gold card was immune with an ability. They couldn't get scorched either. They couldn't get weathered either. They were
Good old
100%. They were impervious to all damage at all. Even the immune that we have right now is less strong, but the fact that you can give it always, I mean, it always means that you need to have a way of stopping Avalok, but Aridin, you can't stop that. He can play that turn. That's the problem. Stopping Avalok is okay. I mean, it does feel a little binary, like, oh, there's Avalok. Do I have an answer for Avalok? No. Well,
I lose the game.
Lose this game now. Like that is, it feels like there's a lot of binary things based around immunity.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, you always need to be in a position to play it. And it really is about, you have to look at like the entire gameplay loop of playing an immune unit and how that wins you the game. Everything you did before that allowed you to get into that position. So all the provisions that you had to build the deck that allowed you to get to that point were costs to creating that. I think Bane in the chat is saying, not the Bane, I think, but Bane, Bane is saying that Hubert is only cheap on paper as you build the whole deck around him. That is, well, Hubert is cheap on paper, definitely. I totally forgot he was 8 points. But you do need a lot of other stuff. The thing about Hubert is that Synthesis plays and Ocfist and things that do damage are universally good anyway. So you're not building a bad deck around Hubert. You're building a deck around Hubert that you will win if you have Hubert.
So whilst this question is, what do you feel about the cards that, if there's any cards that need a nerf or stuff? And I feel we've talked a lot about Hubert and Visigota. I think Visigota is fine I know that's a bit different to what everyone else says. I honestly think Visigoth is fine. I don't think it's an issue at all. Hubert is too cheap. I 100% agree. I think the ability is fine. I think he's like Beardy pointed out, he's just like a Glace. He's easily played around. You can do all sorts of stuff. And if you can't play around him, then that's just a bad matchup and you just lose, right? Sometimes you have a bad matchup against the deck. There's plenty of decks that can play around it, plenty of tier 1 decks that can. Monsters can't, that's fine, right? It's fine to have one deck that is a bad matchup, right? That's fine. Hubert is fine. He just needs added provisions because he's too cheap. He is too cheap. Like we pointed out, at the moment he's only run with Adder because that is probably the best way of doing it. Some people are running him in Meve Engine Overload, which is probably a better, a more all-round deck, but less targeted. But again, like that's very, very strong in there. People were getting great results with him. I think if you make him a 10, 11 provision card, people will be like, damn, do I want to run Hubert? Maybe not. It's a bit expensive. The two cards I want to talk about most in NR that I, in my opinion, feel that need a nerf. Botchling. I think Botchling is just too strong. It's just too strong. They should put it back to. They should never have reverted it back to what it was. They accidentally changed it, and they should have just kept it. People were complaining that it was too weak then, but at the moment it is too strong, and it wasn't too weak before. It was still viable, especially with Meve being able to buff it and stuff. I think it would definitely fit into Meve, even if it was back to how it was. Right now, it is an absolute monster. It is just insane. It's just almost impossible to remove board. You see, because the thing with it is it requires so much removal to remove if you don't have a lock, that you just lose against Meve, right? Because you've had to use all of your removal tools to get rid of this Botchling, and then everything else runs wild, right?
Not only that, like if they switch to Labakin, like Crack is just dead, so yeah.
Botchling's just so strong.
I've had an idea for Botchling. What if the game remembers what? So if you say you start on Botchling and say your opponent damages it by 3, and then you switch it to Labakin, it resets. But then if they damage that and you switch it back again, it remembers where it's Botchling.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. That would work. Yeah. So it basically has like a soft 10. That could work, right? Because the fact that you can just it soaks up any random damage, it prevents things like orders. It just stops you from. It's basically like a soft immunity, right? Because if you play that, you can't play any damage card turn 1, right? If they play it first, Marauder's dead. You've got a 2-point brick in your hand if you're SK. Like it's just too strong. Like there's too many things that Botchling can actually do if you don't have a lock. Obviously, it gets kind of by lock, but I mean it's. I think Botchling needs some sort of nerf. It's not super OP. There are worse cards, but I think it's slightly too strong. And the other one is Anna. Anna with Meve is just too strong because she's instantly a 6 for 7 provisions that is 2 points a turn. So she's one provision.
Or 7 instantly if you ever tried it on the board.
Yeah. She's instantly a 7 for 7 if you ever tried it. But she's basically a 6 for 7 that is 2 points a turn if not answered, and you have to deal 5 damage to kill her. Because if you deal 4 damage, you're just going to unicorn her back up, and then she's a 9 for 7, right? Like it's an 8 for 7. It's just too strong. So in my opinion, they're the only 2 NR cards that are really close to the line that need a nerf, and they only need a slight nerf. I think Anna at a 3 would be fine because then you buff at a 4, and then Karenex can kill her, right? You can then kill her with 4 if it kills her, right? She's just slightly too strong because she's at 5 with Meve. She's very hard to kill. 5 is like the perfect number, right? It's very hard to deal 5 damage. I think Meve and Botchling are the 2. The rest of the NR, like I said, Hubert maybe a little bit. Visigoth, I got no issues with. The rest of them, they're all fine. It's just those 2 that really... They carry in the faction, right? If you take those 2 cards out of it, that NR really struggles, right? Those 2 cards are really strong.
I mean, every faction has every faction you could say have 2 key cards that are very important to their win rate. And I think the thing is the criticizing of Botchling plays with my heart a bit, because when they changed Botchling back to transforming and all that, I liked it. I think it was okay for Northern Realms to have a card that strong, because it seemed like every other faction had some cards that are maybe auto include because they're just so damn good. Like Mullane is a card like that, I think. And cards that fill these roles that just do it better than others. So if you have an engine and you're a Nilfgaard or Scoia'tael, you take the best engine you can. But if you're Northern Realms, Botchling is that engine, and you have that. You're in the engine faction and you have the best engine in the game. But I mean, the thing about it healing all the time, it is it plays around a lot of things and it's annoying. But I mean, a lock, that's it. You just lock it. I think that because a lock solves the problem. Anna as well, I think 4 is not... I like the idea of nerfing it so when she's buffed, she's 4. again, Anna's another card that I love because I miss Redanian Night Elect so dearly.
Yeah, those cards.
I miss my boosty boys. So
Memories.
Anna's the only boosty boy left, and she's not even a boy. So it's we're playing with what we have here, and I think that Anna is. Meve is the leader that I wanted, so I could play Anna at her max potential because I felt like I wasn't getting to do that because I needed some sort of boost to stick, or I needed to use a full test charge, which I have done in some games to boost her. But I mean, yeah, like there are ways to make her work, and there are ways to stop her. It's difficult. Maybe she could get a provision increase, but I feel like I don't know. Like Anna and Botchling, these are mainstays for the mid range, for the midpoint in a Northern Realms deck that actually lets the faction threaten in a familiar way, but in a very strong way as well. The problem is with a strong threat that becomes familiar, it becomes teched against, and a weak threat that is rare might steal you a few games, but otherwise can probably be beaten. So if you have a card that is expected but very, very strong, this is what tier 1 is. You know Morvran is good, you know what he has, but he'll still beat you. Morvran has a whole deck full of that stuff. Northern Realms does not have that. So I think that if they are going to take Botchling down like they pre-nerf Drog and they pre-nerf Stennis, this time they need to really give the faction something when they do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very well put.
Yep.
I think we should move to the next question. But before that, I'd like to point out, that we are accepting questions from the audience, right? So if you have something interesting and you want our experts to, give you feedback, this is the time to do it. And now I'm gonna let Chezzy move on to our final topic. But very, very well put thoughts, like about the previous one. Really enjoyed this.
All right. Our final topic of our faction chat today is about the upcoming expansion, right? What card mechanics would you guys in the show like to see brought back from Vintage Gwent, or can you think of any brand new mechanics that you may like to see in Homecoming? Well, we've just heard Spiro talk about armor. He touched on it very, very briefly. He also talked about change to Botchling. Does anybody else have any other things that they want to talk about? We're open to the whole floor. Who wants to take this topic first?
I've been on record by saying I think that loyalty or orders can come back. Orders, the old school orders, not to be confused with current orders in game. Sure. These are abilities that triggered when the leader is being played, and I think that this mechanic was really, really hard to balance in Vintage Gwent because every leader could only be used once, and also every leader gave you body on the board as well. Also, all the orders units were cards that came out of the deck when the order was played, not like stuff that did stuff on the board. So every orders card was a thinning card that was too good, and just made plays too strong. But now we live in a world where leaders have multiple charges and multiple uses per turn, and we have cards like in Lyrian Arbalest in Thronebreaker, like a card that just pings every time a leader is used. So I think that the landscape is ready to have this ability come back. I think Nilfgaard had a single bronze card that attempted to do something like this, but since all the Nilfgaard leaders were single use or no use, it was a terrible card. But if you give this card to like Northern Realms, where they have Meve and full test 3 uses and Demivend, like soft cap on how many times you can use it, these would be massive cards for Demivend specifically, but also Meve could use it well as well. Be careful. But cards that do stuff when the leader ability is played, I think we're ready for it to come back.
I would like to see some sort of machine synergy come back. I remember, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but crewman synergy.
Yeah.
When I think of
course
Northern Realms,
I remember crewman.
You stole my idea, God damn it!
I never played soldiers once, right? Like that wasn't a thing.
I
wanted a 6-point body crewman that can't be removed, and now all your engines are great now. It's like the Siege Master needs a
all my soldiers.
I mean, when I think of Northern Realms, I think of trebuchets, I think of machines, I think of an army of just soldiers in the front lines and the back lines, the siege weapons, laying destruction to the opponents, like castles or whatever. And I would really like to see machines come back. I'm not saying it should come back, and obviously we remember the most notorious machine leader back in Vintage Gwent, obviously being Henslot Machine. I'm not, yeah. I'm just saying I'd like to see like crewmen back. I'd like to see like synergies that directly benefit from crewmen and machines, and get that like feeling of a real battlefield of your soldiers in the front and your crewmen and your machines in the back. And I really would like to see something come back with regards to, you know, machines and crewmen and whatnot.
Yeah, Siege Support's the only card in the game that's kind of like that still.
Yeah, I mean, you don't,
and
you
Siege,
hardly
and
see
Siege
them at
Masters.
moments.
Yeah, it's like they tried to take it in a different direction, but they could have made it more universal, like the way crewman was universal. Every machine cared about crewmen, every crewman cared about machines, and that kind of universal mechanic is not a bad thing. Like they have Siege Masters and Siege Supports that don't specifically say these are good machine cards, while also clearly being machine cards. But if they both had like a similar keyword to them as well, it would just be that much better for a deck you'd want to build around it.
Beardy?
Well, the thing is, like, you all mentioned, like, armor, and the funny thing is, like, armor was never, like, it hasn't been viable in Old Gwent for a long, long time, but the funny thing is, I think it would be pretty damn good in this version of Gwent, as, like, another, layer of protection. So I could see, like, some, like, interesting mechanics armor-wise. But I think we are forgetting, and I think somebody typed it down in chat, is we're gonna get a bunch of new cards with as like with Bredanian part of NR, right? So for instance, Shani.
We assume.
I think Shani would be like pretty damn strong if she had the same ability, right? Like that was that would probably give edge to NR. But I completely agree with the
Is that the
Spiro.
ability you're talking about? Like res
Sorry?
and give immune? Like res and give immune? Like she used to
She
res
was
a
giving
bronze and
immune,
give it
really?
gold?
No,
Or are
she
you
gave
talking
2
about
armor,
giving-
right?
She gave 2 armor
Yeah,
later.
that was yeah.
She gave 2 armor later, but we're in a world where giving immunity is a thing. So it's possible that she could res a bronze and give it immune, which would be
I
pretty
think if
damn
she,
good.
I think if she did that, right, it would have to be immunity for 1 turn or something like that, right? So that because if you give it immunity the entire game, it'd be a bit silly.
Yeah, then she would need to be like 15p or something, right?
Yeah,
She needs to be an
20
armor
point
card.
shot.
I mean, if she
Yeah.
resurrects, she's going to be an expensive card anyway. So
Yeah,
I
exactly,
think
exactly.
armor is fine, especially if there's an armor synergy thing. You want more armor on the.
But also, as like Spiro said, I really wish that machines were like somewhat viable, because at this point, like they just don't feel remotely playable, right? And before, like having like setup, and all of a sudden like your ballistas just like clear the board, and crewmen, as you guys said, I think the game needs to be more bronze oriented rather than just playing just like good old points in terms of unicorns and those shenanigans. And machines were like perfect, bronze example of bronzes from Old Gwent, in my opinion. And I'd like to see something in that regard.
Yeah. Like I like how in the Monsters Mirror, the early game is like this thrive trade-off. Like your Archospore kills a Drowner, and your Drowner kills the Archospore, and then your Neckers come down, and then like I like that sort of like early game. Like I think that having bronzes that cater more towards like this early game dancing, that is actually entertaining. It feels like there's minion combat happening in the game even when there isn't. That's something I think that New Gwent did really, really well by lowering the numbers down and making removal more important. It makes it feel like there's combat in a game that actually does not have a combat phase. I love it.
So the one thing I would like to add to Northern Realms, it's not really a mechanic, and it's not like I have no mechanic in mind or anything, but we touched on it earlier. I'd like to see more point spam in Northern Realms. There's just no point spam. There's no option to go point spam in Northern Realms, right? There's not really any.
Just play neutral cards.
There are 2 cards. There are 2 cards, right? You've got Scytheman, and you've got you've got Scytheman, and you've got what's it called, right? They're not point spammy because they are kind of enginey, but they're kind of point spammy, right? You just put points on the board. Try to Scytheman
but Trident can be like ridiculous amount of points, right? So
but that's a pure engine. I mean Scytheman and Temerian infantry, right? They get +1 for every boosted unit you have. Like that's kind of point spammy because you're getting buffed units, and it's kind of engine-y. Like I just want to see things that are but they're deploy abilities, right? I want to see more deployment.
I mean, poor fucking infantry is like instant 5, right? But
it's a 5, but that has
5 that carries Lyrian Scytheman always activates off.
It makes sure that activates. You've got field medic. I want to see more stuff like that, more support for that archetype, right? Because I feel like that's what's holding Northern Realms back, right? That's the only reason Meave's the good one right now, is because all their good cards are engines, right? And they're not good if they're getting removed, so Meave's the ones protecting them. If you had more cards like Scytheman, like Temerian infantry, like field medic that synergizes with them, I think that would be pretty good for Northern Realms. Now, it's not a new mechanic or anything like that, but I want to see that more fleshed out so that I can play Northern Realms 4-point spam with just a value leader or something like that, rather than having to play full on end. That's why I like playing Shoot Meave, right? Because it's half and half, right? I'm playing a bit of point spam whilst with Meave protecting the key engines. I'd like to see some more point spam in Realms, but I just like to see more point spam across the board, right? Because I don't like control. I really don't like control. So I mean, that's just me. But there's
You
nothing
got to run
special.
Vandergrift's Blade and Tridem Infantry, Temerian Infantry, Poor
Yeah.
Infantry, Lyrian Scytheman, Kidwinny Sergeant, and I guess Blue Stripe Commando, and then you got your point spammy.
Yeah,
it's not good.
It's not good, right? Yeah, I want it to be good.
But it's less. Your opponent has less to do with it. Like you're and maybe a Wyvern Scale Shield. Like you're gonna get big points off your Temerian Infantry. You are gonna get like Croc can't deal with Poor Infantry at all, or Lyrian Scytheman or anything. Kidwinny Sergeant's like really good for the boosts. Like
Exactly.
it's a boosty way of doing it. But
that's why
Ronvid maybe like
right?
Ronvid can't be hurt by Croc either. There's a way to do it. It's just not as good as other.
That's why Shoop is the one, right? Because Shoop can use that package. It's a small package as opposed to an archetype, right? So Shoop thrives on small packages that are good. It uses little small packages like that are good, and then uses multiple of them. Whereas, like, I want to see a full archetype that revolves around that, right? So that I don't have to run Shoop. I can run double Scytheman, double thing, as opposed to running Shoot where I can only run singles. If that's. But Beardy, do we have any questions from the chat today?
I think it's your decision, my friend, to choose one. And,
it's on me, right? It's on me.
Yeah. Choose the lucky winner.
All right. So if chat got any for me today, right? Immune engines are the problem. So if for example there was a keyword non-immune, I think there is no problem. That there is just a big unit with immunity. What do you think, Team Leviathan Gaming? Would it still be a problem? So I assume by that you'd put a tag on Visigoth and those sort of things that cannot be immune, right? So you cannot immune them. Would that make it viable? Would that be better for Avalak? I think that's basically what that question's asking. The answer to that is, I think the better solution, right, is when you immune something. We had this on the last talk show. Once you immune something, you can no longer trigger its abilities, right? Like it's immune, you cannot touch it.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a better way of going around it. Like
and,
that would solve the issues,
What's the point of giving immune to something then? I guess
an
it has
engine,
to be an
right?
engine.
Yeah, it would have to be an engine that isn't a deploy. So like Visigoth or like Anna would
so they
still
can do its own thing basically.
So Anna would still work, right? Because you don't have to touch her, but Visigoth wouldn't work because obviously you have to touch him, right? So you can't immune Visigoth. Yeah, exactly. So Visigoth would constantly always be able to be answered by movement, right? So you'd just be like, Visigoth is not an issue because I can just move. Right?
Also, like botchling, like making, as Shadow pointed out, like immune botchling would still be very, very strong, right? So
yeah.
I mean, immune botching though. I mean,
you wouldn't be able to heal it at least, but
you wouldn't be able to heal it. And I mean,
but still, like 1 point a turn is no joke.
When have you ever seen anybody immune botchling? Never, because it's a tank. Right? It just sucks up all random damage, right?
Sometimes there's just no other target for it.
Yeah, that's the only time you ever immune it is if you have no other target, because botchling doesn't need immunity. Like, if you immune your botchling, I'm okay with it. Like, I'm fine if botchling's. If you wasted your immunity on botchling, I'm okay with it. I don't have to use a lot.
Because then my Ragnarok might actually kill it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
True.
But Beardy, did you have any other questions?
No, I think it's slowly that time of the day where we have to close this awesome show. So I think it was a really fun episode. I really enjoyed it. I think like you guys know a lot more about NR than me. I mean, I know everything like in theory, but I haven't tried many of those cards. And as per usual, I'd like to thank my co-host Chezzy for joining me. I really love doing this, so has been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to be here, Beardy. It's always a pleasure to do this alongside you.
Yeah, and my guess, I think this is your part according to the script. So.
Right. Oh yeah. Sorry. I was just doing this ad-lib. I don't have to show no.
Yeah. I mean, we can just ditch the script at this point because it makes like some awkward moments, right? But
no, it was a great show. I'm honored to do this. we've got McBeard on today, and like he basically, like, I mean, I say inspired me to do this, right? But I mean, you guys asked me to do this, and I did it. But I mean, McBeard was the first person I watched doing this sort of stuff. And it's been great being able to do something similar to him. I hope that the chat enjoys it as much as, or at least a tenth as much as you enjoy Commander's Horn. It's great to be here doing it with you.
I just love doing talk shows. I love talking about Gwent a lot,
same,
and it's nice to be just continuously be involved with the community. I'm happy that you guys want to keep involving me. You guys, like all the people that do talk shows and all the people that do podcasts, and it's really cool to think that my podcast inspired other podcasts. I feel like someone would eventually have done it, but I am. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be on another show, especially the TLG show, which is it's doing pretty well. I like the faction challenge theories.
Awesome.
The faction chats.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on, and I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else. But I think that's it from us today. Spiro, do you have anything you think that we could talk about, or anything you want to add?
No, I just want to. I mean, obviously, just very, very interesting conversation. You know, when you get like-minded people that could talk about, you know, something they love doing, something they do every day, almost. Very interesting conversations. I loved talking about obviously all of our favorite games together, and very enjoyable conversations. And can't really think of much else to say about it unless McBeard has anything else to add. I think that's it for me. I think that was just a great episode. I loved talking with you guys, but yeah, not sure if McBeard has anything else to mention about it.
I do have something else to add though before we finish, because in case some people have not known, I'm actually joining TLG. This is the inaugural. This is like my inaugural contribution to TLG, and I'm super happy about it. I'm really excited. I think that this team has grown so much, and now has like top level players entering tournaments all the time now. We say all the time last two, so and we expect it to be more. Well, people are like,
that's all time, yeah.
Swarming the pro ladder. People in TLG have always been really assisting, have assisted me, helped me train for Gwent skirmish as well. Always down to co-op, and I think it's time for me to team up, because I think that my ability as a player and a caster and a content creator only increases when I surround myself with excellence. Because I've been doing this by myself, right? Commander Sworn, which doesn't change, by the way, at all. Commander Sworn has just been a passion project, a solo project. I felt like everybody who is involved with it is like very much my family and my team. But formally, this will be the team that I get my hot tips from. But yeah, just for everybody that's watching Commander Sworn podcast and everything like that, like nothing changes for the podcast. I'm just going to be more involved with these geniuses.
I mean, I'd just like to say how absolutely thrilled we are to have McBeard
exactly.
on board. Yeah. We were absolutely thrilled when we heard the news ourselves, right? Like, it came as a bit of a shocker. I mean, we didn't expect McBeard to trust us with being the team he wanted to team up with, but we absolutely love to have him here. We've had lots of interactions before, and he's been nothing but an absolute gentleman. When I joined his talk show, I know the rest of the guys that have been on his talk show have had great experiences too, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And once again, another absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. So welcome aboard, McBeard. It's great to have you here, and hopefully we'll have some great experiences in the future as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I know that kind of immersing myself in a more professional atmosphere will help me be a better player and a better caster. And I think that ultimately that's my job, right? Broadcasting is my gig. Those gigs are extremely important for me, and while I feel like I do a good job and I bring a lot to the table that other people can't bring, one thing that there is always room for is improvement, and the biggest space for improvement is game knowledge, always, for everybody. So even at the highest level, you still benefit from playing a lot. You still benefit from practicing. You still benefit from talking about those things. And I want to be a part of all of that stuff, like very much in touch, because streaming the game is fun, but I play better when I don't stream. So if all I'm doing is streaming, then I'm not improving, and I'm kind of just talking to myself and maybe my chat. So I'm not really learning as much, and I'm kind of keeping myself like separated from a community that actually can give the type of I guess additional thought processes that I would need to actually improve. Also, I can think about my mistakes a little bit easier when I'm not on stream.
Of
So
course.
it's just kind of it's a general move for me to do more content, more teamwork, maybe less streaming and better playing at a higher level. And I think that TLG is going to give me all that. And I hopefully can return the favor and give something back as well.
That's awesome. Before I let Beardy wrap up this show, I do just want to point out to McBeard, you probably want to stay away from Pharaoh and Saber if you want to be involved in high-level gameplay and stuff. Those two will probably drag your knowledge down and get you into some bad habits.
I'm playing Green Knight and Saber's ST, and it actually
stay away from that. That is
pretty good. I don't know, like
don't tell them that. They'll be very, very, very.
Well, when I start losing, I'll stop playing it, I guess. But it's been okay. It's been actually pretty good.
But yeah, Beardy, do you want to do the honors?
Yeah. Now it's just time to advertise our glorious website. So make sure you check it out. www.teamleviathangaming.com. We posted a new meta report, which I think is like rather accurate and pretty well put. So make sure to check it out. And I'll see you all next week when we're gonna be joined by the very SK ambassador, Mr. Shinmiri, and our teammate who qualified for Open 8 directly through top 3 finish, Mr. Ultraman. So that's it for today. And once again, it's been a pleasure. See you all next week. Bye-bye.
Take it easy, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.